Hi, my name is Drew Daniels. I'm the cinematographer of Anora, and this is the Go Creative Show.
Hello and welcome to the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. My name is Ben Consoli, and today we've got Drew Daniels back on the show to talk about his latest film, Anora. Drew, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Ben. I'm excited to talk about the film.
I just saw Anora a couple days ago. I didn't get to see it in the theater, which is unfortunate because I think it would have made it even better. But I really, really enjoyed this film, and I feel like you've got such a good working relationship with Sean. It's like the two of you guys just do such great work together. It must have been a blast working on this one.
I mean, it was everything. It was a blast. It was really hard. It was, it was hard on my marriage. It's hard on my family.
How so?
I was in New York for, over 3 months, and I didn't get to come home because of the timing. And I live in New Mexico, and it was just tough. When I start a movie, I'm very in it. It consumes me,
Mm. For better or for worse?
For better or for worse. And everything becomes about the movie, and it's a big, huge commitment, creatively. My brain space, my health, everything goes to the movie. So yeah, it was a tough one, but working with Sean is a dream, and we have such a creative melding of our minds that it was just quite easy.
Well, obviously the Sean we're talking about is Sean Baker, the director of the film, and the two of you guys have worked together quite a bit. If you wouldn't mind, though, I am a little bit curious about this kind of difficult part of it, being away from the family, 3 months, very little communication. I mean, people don't talk about that much.
No.
But I can only imagine from my own work, and I'm just doing commercials, a couple of days, those few days, I can't think of anything else. And I can imagine like being, how do you be a good husband, father, partner when your mind is so consumed with something like this? How do you balance?
Well, I don't think there's a really good way to do it. I think, well, when I'm not working, I'm all in. I'm a stay-at-home dad. I'm very much as committed to the family as I am to the film. When I'm on a film, it becomes my everything. But it's hard. Not a lot of people talk about it. I remember reading an article that Bradford Young, I believe Bradford wrote it, or no, maybe it was Sean Porter. It was Sean Porter, and maybe he even interviewed Bradford, and I think it was a couple cinematographers talking about it. And I read that, and I thought it was actually very helpful, because it was kind of right at the beginning of my career when it was starting to take off, and I could see it going that direction. I had a daughter, I had my first kid, and my wife has basically committed her everything to the kids, and she's a stay-at-home mom, for lack of a better word. And and she really believes in my career and supports me, and I don't think I could do it without her. But at the same time, it's very, very hard. You try to FaceTime, you try to work around your schedule with the kids, which oftentimes is like several hours or 8 hours apart. You're waking up while they're going to bed, or so on and so forth. And it's just, it can be quite crazy. Makes no sense, but I try to justify it in my mind that basically if I had a 9 to 5 and I worked every 5 days a week, that maybe it would sort of balance out the amount of time that I'm gone per year. I get really intense moments of time. I get really intense moments of time working and intense moments of time not working. And I think that it's just a different way to balance the life, to balance the work life.
Do you think that is essential for really high quality expert filmmaking like you do? Or do you think that's more of a result of just your personality in the way you treat each thing that's going on in your life?
I definitely has to be some personality, because I get obsessive and I go all in when I'm obsessed with something. I have that obsessive personality. Um, and it goes through phases, you know. Um, it's I do think it's quite personality based. I see other people able to balance their work life a lot better and not sink into like obsession and just full on alienation of your family or whatever it might be. Um, but I think I am hired because of my personality largely. I feel like that's what um, gets you the job. You know, the interview. You know, in the interview, I feel like a director is looking for someone that they're going to go to battle with. You know,
Mm.
and that may or may not be like your resume, your technical prowess, blah blah blah. I think a lot of it is actually just your personality and how you vibe with them, and like, do they want to be stuck in a room or next to a camera or in like the most difficult situations possible with someone that they don't truly like, you know? So I think I've always been a chameleon in my life because I grew up traveling as a kid. You know, my dad was in the army, and I grew up in Puerto Rico and Panama and North Carolina, Texas. So I've just been able to make friends easily and adapt to my surroundings quite easily. And I think and throughout my 20s, I was the same way. And like even now, it's the same way. Whenever I go somewhere new for a movie, I fall in love with the place. I I have like I become a local at the bar or at the coffee shop. You know, I try to do these things, and it's just part of my life. It's part of my personality.
Do you think that type of personality results in your best cinematography, your best work?
Um, I don't know. My best work, I think, results from working with the best directors. Truly, I can't take that much credit for it. You know, like it's really the directors. Like I think my personality might attract certain directors, which is great. But like working with someone like Sean or Trey, like it's really just me facilitating and sort of melding and being the person to figure out how to achieve their vision. You know, like that, and that excites me because I don't know. I've never really wanted to be a director. It really scares the crap out of me, and also just the amount of commitment and obsession doing one thing for a year or 2 years or whatever. I like being a cinematographer because you do it and then you move on and you take the next challenge. And I always like my films to be a new challenge for me, whatever that may be. If something has to excite me and something has to be scary, something that I haven't done before or whatever. Um, so there's a lot of criteria, but I don't know. I think it's the directors ultimately that I'm attracted to and that make my work shine.
Well, how has your relationship with Sean Baker evolved out of through all your films? I mean, has there been any changes in the way you approach prep or something like that, where now that you've developed a shorthand over the years,
Yeah.
things change?
Maybe as you develop a shorthand, there's less prep. I don't
How do
know.
you mean?
I feel like I keep trying to remember what prep was like for Anora, and like it wasn't a lot of like normal prep. It wasn't like sitting in an office, shot listing, you know, going through the script. Like I didn't even have like an office. It was just like an open room with like wardrobe in one corner, props stashing a bunch of lamps and things in one corner, the ADs like clicking away, you know, and it was just one tiny, and not even a big room. It's like literally as big as the room I'm in right now was our whole prep office. So I didn't really want to be in there, and I don't think Sean did either. So most of our prep was, you know, hanging out, and we watch movies. We do a lot of prep. I would say almost like scattered months and months and months leading up to the official green light or whatever. You know, whenever I get to the place, Brighton Beach, in this case, already I had done essentially a lot of prep. I had done camera tests. We had figured out what lenses we were going to shoot on. We had figured out what stocks we were going to shoot on, what format. We had picked out references and talked about films and talked about looks and things like that, and and just overall like feel of the film. And I feel like all of that stuff is like the really important thing. I would have loved to have more time to shot list, but it was just a very quick and chaotic prep, and we only really shot listed, I would say, the section of the film with the home invasion. You know, there we had a very specific plan for the blocking and the shot listing, but Sean would come to set with like shot lists that he'd kind of like just write on like a piece of paper or you know napkin or something. It was very vague, or sometimes just on his phone. Just a list of whatever. But honestly, like it's almost like with any film, you shot listen to all this stuff. I never look at it once we start shooting. Storyboard, shot list, whatever. It's kind of you do it as more of a process to like understand the film and understand the beats and understand what the scene is about and understand how it could potentially be. But once you start seeing it unfold before you, I feel like you have to respond to what's happening in real time, or I don't know, or else I feel like it becomes quite stale when you're just executing a storyboard or a shot list or something.
Well, I think it's almost like the prep. What it's preparing you for is unexpected changes on your shoot days because you
Yeah,
understand what it is that you want to do. You understand the film so well
yeah,
that maybe the things you plan don't actually happen, but it doesn't matter. It's
yeah,
because you've done that prep, you're able to adapt.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. It's basically to familiarize yourself with all the themes, with the language, with all that stuff. So you get it all out there. You explode it out of your brain onto a page somehow, and then you kind of just forget about it, or you store it in the back of your mind. Think it's like things to train your eye to look out for. It's like, oh, we would do this on this film. We wouldn't do this. You know, like
When I watch,
understanding the language of the film is the big part of it. I think that you get out of it.
well, let's talk about the language of the film,
Mm-hmm.
Anora, because when I'm watching it, it almost feels like, and this is a compliment, it feels like a documentary to me. It feels so like I'm just watching these people do
Yeah,
their thing. I mean, not the whole thing, obviously. There are moments where clearly it's lit perfectly, it's shot perfectly, it looks amazing. But there's something about it that just feels so alive and so in the moment
yeah.
that I think it keeps you captivated as a viewer because you just don't know what is coming next. And that's what I'm getting out of it as a viewer. I'm
Yeah.
curious what your intention was and what the language of the film is.
Oh, my definitely my intention was for the film to feel alive. I think that's something that just excites me in general. Um, I think Waves feels like that. Red Rocket, maybe some extent, but this film very much so because it's actually quite plot driven, and once they're going, they're going. Like we have
Yeah.
an objective and the film is moving, and I really had a lot of fun just almost propelling the camera and like struggling. I love it when the camera feels like it's struggling to keep up. And that's kind of was my one of the concepts, I guess. I didn't really think of it as a concept. Maybe it was just me struggling to keep up. But I'm operating the camera. I'm we're kind of like injecting chaos into every scene as well. Um, and imperfection. I think imperfection was something that I was very willing to embrace on this film, and that excited me about it. Um, like I think of, for example, like Magnolia, like some of my favorite cinematography ever, and it's so imperfect. If you really look at it, the camera's shaking violently. There's moments where it's like out of focus and then it clicks into focus. There's just some messiness there. Even There Will Be Blood has that. Like all of his films, and I feel like there's something that makes it feel visceral and alive and handmade. It feels like there are people behind the images, creating the images, and that was like something that was always on my mind, like how to inject that. Like for example, like rolling the dolly just right on the floor. Um, when we were shooting handheld, often we would do like no rehearsals, so that the camera was just reacting first instinct, as in a documentary, to what's happening in front of you. So I don't know exactly where they're going to go, but I'm handheld, so like I can adapt. And usually I like doing it that way, often with handheld, unless it's like dangerous and you have to like, really know what you're doing. You're pulling someone walking backwards downstairs or something. We're not going to do that without rehearsals, but I do like to just dance with the actors and play jazz with the actors. And that's something that I try to inject a little bit of our chaos, or a little bit of our like that visceral imperfection, because it's just my natural instinct is a documentary instinct. What is happening in front of you? Where's the best place to be? When's the best time to pan over? When's the best time to pull out or go over or shoulder or whatever it might be? Who do I follow? All those things. Yeah.
Well, that injection of chaos into your work, do you think that's coming more from you? Is that coming more from Sean? I mean, I can imagine that there's some, fear with that when you do it.
Yeah.
There has to be points where you're sort of like, why am I doing this? But
Yeah.
like, is it a little bit of self-sabotage in an effort to make something even better?
Well, I don't know. I really got into it starting with waves because, um, you know, in general, waves in so many ways. Me and Trey, we did Krisha, we did It Comes at Night, and It Comes at Night. We had so many rules, and it felt very formal and very controlled, and it kind of ends up feeling contrived because it's so dialed and specific. And I'm not Robert Eggers and Jaron Blaschke. I just don't do that like the way those guys do it. They plan so much and execute so well, and I kind of like being in this more intuitive and visceral sort of response to what's happening. And basically, so like going from It Comes at Night to Waves, we wanted to throw out a lot of those rules. We had a very specific shot list, a very specific plan and language how we wanted to shoot it, but we also wanted to feel free, and we wanted to create this feeling that the camera could go anywhere and see and pan over and see anything, and there's not going to be a light there. There's not going to be crew there. It's like this Malick sort of thing, because me and Trey actually both worked on Malick films as PAs.
No way.
Yeah, so that was a little thing you're trying to borrow and bring into it, and often things, we would think of this shot in our heads and we'd plan it and execute it, and it just feels a little too stagey, or it just lacks life. So then you inject some chaos into it. You throw something in the scene and you don't tell anybody else it's going to happen, or maybe you start or maybe you just be like, while you're rolling, you're like, hey, let's just go again. I'm going to start with the camera over here now, and now we have to get to where we were, but the camera's starting on the opposite side of the room or something, where it just, it becomes like almost a challenge for the operating and for the blocking and for like the scene to work in a certain, to get to a place where it feels like raw and real, but you're still in control of it, though.
How
But
did the actors respond?
I mean,
I guess everyone's different, but
I haven't had any real issues with actors getting upset because like things are changing or things like that. Like, I feel like generally the directors that I really enjoy working with, they cast their actors how they cast their crew. It's like people they want to hang with, people they want to party with, people that they like. Um, so you try to get rid of like bad apples. It's like people that are all we're all in it for the same reason, the same goal. And I think that's very important for the crew, especially like casting your crew in a very meticulous way. And Sean was really adamant about getting people that he really liked, people that were film lovers, people that were passionate. He wanted to talk to the crew. Like he interviewed even like, like grips and things like that, like
wow.
PAs and stuff. Like he was talking to them and whatnot. Because it's very important. I think it can really kill the vibe of a film set when you have people that are just constantly unhappy or have a bad attitude.
Yeah, people can tolerate it for a few days on a commercial, but when you're doing a film, I mean,
Yeah,
you're with these people for this is your family for that time period, and it's got to
exactly.
work. The personalities have to work.
Yeah, exactly. So the people that I generally enjoy working with create a family environment on set. Yeah, and there's a lot of trust. There's a lot of freedom. You feel you feel like empowered. You feel like you can do something or try something because I'm operating too. So like if I see something and I want to go for it, when I'm operating, sometimes I just do it and nobody knows I'm going to do it. So like the boom operator has to be ready, and people get used to it. The people they know, like, okay, I got to be behind the camera always. I have to be ready to swing over. I'm not going to screw people over and go like completely 360. I mean, sometimes I did, like when we're out in, for example, when we're in
Like,
Vegas.
actually, on second thought, I
No,
do screw
actually we
people
did.
over.
When we're in Vegas, when we're on Fremont Street in Vegas, and he's like, I'm married, I just got married. I'm an American. The camera's going around them 360.
Yeah.
And if you look closely, you can actually see Sean with the little monitor. Like,
Oh, no
he's
way.
in the background. Yeah, yeah. Just because it just felt right, like I just did it. And it felt like, if I see some crew, it just looks like a bunch of people everywhere.
It was so funny. It's funny you mentioned that scene because I've been down that street a million times. You just let that LED ceiling. If anybody has been down the street or seen the movie, you know that there's this giant LED roof that kind of connects both sides of the street. And you just let that go. I mean, what a light source that is. It's a massive overhead light source.
yeah, it was
I
awesome.
imagine you just how do you even light in addition to that? You must just have used it and let it
Oh,
happen.
yeah, we didn't. No, we didn't do anything in addition. It was such a beautiful and interesting and changing source. I love those. I love the light that will change, and you can see it's changing, why it's changing. That's some of my favorite stuff. Like even like I'm noticing the sun here, and like there's clouds coming, and you see it changing on camera. I think there's something really cool about that. But yeah, the Fremont Street. That was like one of the few times where we went like what people think of Sean Baker when they think of like, oh yeah, he's just gonna grab people off the street and put them in the movie, and the camera's gonna be like freewheeling and blah blah blah, almost in like this Terrence Malick kind of way because we're on a wide lens on open streets, swirling around and stuff.
Yeah.
It did feel like that a bit. It's probably one of the only times that feels like that traditional, or at least what I thought Sean was going to be like when I first met him and worked with him. I thought he was going to be like that, very just very loose style, just very like everything's improvised. That because that's how the films feel. They
Yep.
feel like they're unhinged, like they could just go anywhere. But then when I started working with Sean, on not I wish I did Florida. Florida's beautiful. No, on Red Rocket, I was really shocked because he's so controlled and so precise, and it was just it was not what I expected. And Sean really prefers, like a static shot, a wide static frame with like a really interesting and complex composition, and really elegant like lateral moves or a really gentle push or a really simple stuff. So I was quite impressed and shocked, and then he wanted to do on Red Rocket, he wanted to do unconventional coverage. And someone says that and you're like, okay, well, what does that mean? Does that mean oneers? Does that mean we're doing, what are we doing? Like, what, that could be anything. So
That's right up your alley. Being that, what am I doing here? I don't even know what I'm supposed to do.
yeah, well, I really think we came up with some really interesting ways to cover some scenes, and he also is a very, because he's the editor, and when I went to film school, I started as an editor. I didn't know what I wanted to do really, and I loved editing. Um, so I was really into editing for the first few years at film school, which I think made me a good shooter because it really clicked for me when I saw this movie, the Maisels brothers movie, Salesman, and I realized, oh, Salesman is like, for the most part, single camera film, but it
Hmm.
looks, and it's a documentary, but it looks like an actual film. There's close-ups, medium shots, inserts, wide shots, established. There's everything, and it's one guy running around shooting in a really clever way where they can cover mouths or overlap dialogue and make it feel invisible and seamless, even though it's a one guy running around and a sound guy, the two brothers. Anyway, so that really, I really learned a lot about editing watching that film and shooting, and then I wanted to become a shooter instead. And but ever since then, I am very very conscious of the edit, and I like to shoot for the edit, and I don't like to overshoot, and I like to make bold decisions with how we shoot it. And Sean was on board with all of those things, and we would talk about the edit constantly. And that was no different on Anora. On Anora, it's almost one of the heaviest conversations we have every day is like how each scene we block it, and then we think about some shots,
Yeah.
the sort of layout of the scene, and then we think about the cut and like how the energy of the cut. Are we starting close? How are we ending? Like, what's your hard cut? Is it a hard cut out, or is it a quiet ending to the scene? Like, what? Like, you know what I mean? We always think about like the flow of the scenes, and we try not to recycle shots within a scene as best as we can. Meaning, we won't do a lot of reverse shot, and if it's a shot, we'll hold on that shot for as long as we can, and then we'll cut to the reverse and we'll hold on that reverse as long as we can, trying not to cut back and forth. And then if we have another shot, it's a new shot.
Let's talk about the camera choices
Mm-hmm.
that you made on Anora. I know you shot film for this. Talk to me about what you chose and why.
Well, film was already like a no-brainer. It was a given, and it's a given right when we start. And our producer, Alex Coco, and our line producer, they put it in the budget from the beginning. So it's like kind of a no questions asked about it.
Why is it a no-brainer? Why is that like a guarantee for you?
Just because Sean likes shooting on film. He's a supporter of Kodak, of like the history of film, the future of film. You know, like he enjoys the process more, and there's a magic to it. You know, it's I also enjoy it. I have so much fun shooting film, operating while shooting film. There's nothing like it. You know,
Why is that?
you're looking through the actual glass, through like mirrors, back up through like the ground glass, through an eyepiece, and then you're seeing the shutter flickering. You're seeing, and you're hearing the mag and the film rolling through it. It's like this. It just connects you to the camera and to the process in a really holistic and fascinating way. I just, and then you get it back and it's like Christmas every single day. I really really love it. So that was a given. What wasn't a given though was, is it 4 perf? Is it 2 perf? We had considered 2 perf very briefly. You know, at one point, Alex Coco was like, "Oh, should we do 2 perf? We'll save some money and blah blah blah." And it just didn't feel right. Like this film needed to be anamorphic. I think what anamorphic lenses bring to reality is something very interesting. I think it adds a layer of magic. It adds a fairy tale quality to it almost, you know. And I think this film has that quality with Mikey, with Annie. She's literally living this like Cinderella-esque story, and it needed to be heightened. And there's this wealth and opulence and you know, the Russian oligarchy, all that. It just felt like, okay, anamorphic is going to be better. And then the really interesting part though was shooting on Lomos, you know, old Russian lenses like from the 70s, Lomo round fronts, and that was really Sean. Sean just right from the beginning, he had shot Starlit on Lomos, so he was very familiar with them. But this film being, you know, so Russian, it just felt like a nice nod to that. And it would inject the film with a kind of Russian DNA. And that was really interesting. So we tested a bunch, and we ended up with Airy Rental, and then we got a lens from Old Fast Glass, this 40-120 Lomo zoom that is just incredible. You have to shoot it at like a 5.6 or 8 to get a sharp enough image out of it. But we did it. We pushed the stuff. We pushed the film whatever we could do. Sometimes we shot it at night. Sometimes we shot the opening shot of the movie with it. It just has a really beautiful, beautiful look to it, and it really became the defining lens, the defining combination that basically gave the film its look. You know, the Lomo with the 500T push to stop, underexposed. Like that was kind of our formula, more or less. And then oftentimes we would use a little flasher, like that goes on the front of the camera that pushes light onto the negative as it's exposing it. So it has like a filter that pushes light onto this filter that pushes light into the lens.
Yeah, I was interested in that. I had never heard of it. I'm totally ignorant to shooting anything on film. But I'm like hopeful that one day a project will come around that would make sense for us to do that.
Uh-huh.
But I wasn't familiar with this negative flashing technique. Maybe some of you guys listening are, but it's new to me. So I'd love to hear kind of, it sounds like you were just about to explain sort of what that is and what's the result that you get from it.
Well, ideally, what we would have done was we would have pre-flashed the entire negative, which means in a dark room, uncanning it, rolling it through this machine, your raw negative, to a machine that exposes it equally to like a certain percentage of light. And that basically gives the negative. It baked into the negative. It lifts the shadows. It lifts the image a little bit. And the one of the reasons for that was we really were after this 70s look where in the 70s on films like Taking of Pelham 123 or mainly that one. That was a big influence. And Owen Roizman, I think, was just doing whatever he could do. Same with like Vilmos Zsigmond shooting like McCabe and Mrs. Miller and things like that. Like I think part of it was out of necessity, but also it just kind of becomes the look too.
Mm.
Out of necessity, these things that you do, like for instance, flashing and pushing, like 1 to 2 stops and a flash, like that's a look. That's a lot of things to do to the negative itself before you're even like right baked into the image on film. So we were really after this 70s look, and I was really interested in doing things that they would have done in the 70s out of necessity, shooting on the streets of New York City with as much available light as we could with a minimal footprint. That was part of our goal. Just because we wanted to stay small and we wanted to we didn't want oftentimes people to know we were even shooting a film at all. Like we'd be long lens far away shooting through a window or shooting down the sidewalk or whatever. People had no idea we were shooting because there's like 3 people and a camera and Sean hiding next around the corner, and the producers like have everybody else somewhere else. So yeah,
I
it was
just love
like
how you guys do it. It's such the like vibe and the mindset of an indie film that it's just so interesting that you're doing that at such a high level, still taking that approach.
oh
It's
this
awesome.
but this was a very indie film in every way. Like that's the really cool part that I'm very proud of, is that it's like an indie film that has scope, that feels big, it's shot on 35 anamorphic. It's a lot of these things that you really can't do on indie films, but like Sean Baker can do it. It's like almost a miracle, that this film exists in the way that it exists. I'm very proud of that. I'm also very proud of like what you were saying earlier, that it has this sort of documentary feel. Or I've had a lot of people reach out to me on Instagram and things and just say that, and a lot of cinematographers, and they tell me that the film feels effortless, or that they don't even notice the
Mm.
camera. It just feels like so inherent to the story, to Annie, to her journey, that you aren't quite noticing it. And in like the Roger Deakins tradition, he always talks about that as being like the ultimate goal, is to forget about the camera and just watch the
Mm.
film. And so I'm really proud. I feel like this film does that in a lot of ways. I mean, it still has style. It still has some bold things we're doing, and some very indie things we're doing. And but I think that they are just so part of it that you just go with it. You don't even think about it, and I love that.
We've got a question about lighting from Sanaste_ASC.
Mhm.
How do you work with lighting? How did you work with lighting when you were filming Anora?
Um, well, the conversation with lighting started in almost the opposite way that it ended, which is kind of funny because, sticking to that 70s mindset, we're like, okay, let's shoot with tungsten light only. Let's gel it, half blue. Let's just use like 2K open faces and just like, hit the person with a 2K open face, like kind of like Buffalo 66 or something. I love, that's a film that did that as well, like, you know, a while ago, but it looks like a 70s movie, but it was shot in the whatever, 98 or something. I love that film. It's one of my absolute favorite films, and Sean as well. So, that was a conversation, and we were really into it. And then I started thinking about like what that would look like, and it would have been a bigger footprint. It would have been generators. It would have been 20Ks. It would have been, we had talked about shooting on low ASA stocks, or we shot with reversal film. All of it. We went through a lot of different like iterations of what this film could be, and then this sort of 70s DIY on the ground, on the streets, dirty approach ended up being the winner, and I think it was for the right reasons, all in service of the film and how it was going to and what production was going to look and feel like.
Seems like a
So
lot of
so we
practicals too. Seems like you just embraced it.
yeah, so there's practicals, but often there's like lights wrapping the practicals around. There's LED. We ended up with a lot of LED lights. Um, my gaffer had like this crazy light called the Pro Light, which is essentially like you could put a Fresnel lens in it. It's a hard light. We use that quite a bit. Um, we have this other light that he called the Dragon of Chaos, which I think was just this big like 4x4, or maybe even like 5x5 or 6x6 like LED light that he had like strung cotton across it. So it's like really, really soft, and you can get it right up to close to someone, and it's basically essentially like a 8x8 or 12 by when it's that close and that
Oh,
soft,
wow.
like a book light. It almost looks like a book light. I think it was a Kino Celeb or something like that. So I was just trying to use lights that were practical, and practical in the sense that they were easy and quick and efficient and functional. I wasn't like, and also the lighting always had to feel invisible. Like I didn't want you to like ever like really notice the lighting. I wanted it always to feel motivated by the actual scene, by the location, and I wanted it to, I wanted it to be flattering, but at the same time, like there can be ugly light too. Like I was okay with that. And like I'm just ripping off Deakins. I hear Deakins talk about that. Like if you look at Sicario, like it's a beautiful film, but there's ugly light in Sicario. It's
Mm.
harsh, just sodium vapor lights and yellowish green fluorescent lights in an interrogation room. It's like there's a way to make ugly and inherently ugly light look good by just sculpting it in the right contrast and the right softness and the way it wraps around the face.
Because you
So
feel something from it. Like
yeah,
as a viewer, ugly or beautiful, it still gives you a feeling. And that's kind of the goal of the lighting, is to make you feel
yeah,
something, make
yeah.
it make sense in the scene.
And I really liked, for example, I love the light that you get just driving around at night. I love it when you see the light changing and the greens and the yellows and all the weird colors you get, and seeing them move across a face.
Yeah.
So my idea for nighttime was just light with like a very low level light that felt like, I think it was 3 to 4 stops underexposed on film, pushed a stop, sometimes 2 stops, and still that underexposed, because I wanted it to feel like it was just the dash light or whatever ambient light that's very dim inside the car. Because
Mm.
I wanted, and then I'd pushed the film and shot wide open at a 2 on different lenses, so that we could get as much out of that available light that would be passing through. And because that's one of the good things about digital, is like you could shoot in a car with like almost no lights and see stuff and see the environment and see how the lights change. So I was trying to basically take like film and shoot it like digital by pushing the hell out of it. and
That's actually a question that we have from Christopher Sousa 59 from Instagram. And you talked a little bit about this, so we don't need to belabor it, but wondering what's it like shooting on film in the age that most people are choosing digital. And I'm seeing a trend of people going back to film, but it's not all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
there's some cost implications and it's just impossible for some situations, but
Yeah. No, I mean, I generally like it. There's something like really punk rock about it, especially for Anora. It just felt just so, I don't know, just it just felt so right. Like I could never imagine Anora any other way at this point. Um, but as far as like the lighting and the actual like on the day, like people get so used to it. I think it excites people too, not quite knowing what it's going to look like, and it puts a lot of trust in the cinematographer. It puts a lot of trust in everybody. I think everybody steps their game up a little bit. They're not getting lazy, you know. They're not just like looking at a monitor and doing the bare minimum of what they can have to do. Like there's a lot of pride that people take in their work. I think
mm,
focus pullers have to be very on top of what they're doing. They can't just sit there and pull off a monitor, you know. I mean, you can a little bit with the Light Ranger now, but um, I don't know. I mean, I think there's something that I like when I was going to film school, when I was watching films, it was always we were always working with film, and it just felt like that's what I fell in love with. So I've been very fortunate over the past few years to get a lot of projects on film. This was actually my first feature on 35.
oh, wow.
Yeah, so for me, it's like there's almost like a it's like a benchmark in your career, you know.
Yeah.
It was my first anamorphic film and my first 35 feature. I've done 16 and I've done a TV show with lots of film, one entirely on film, then Euphoria, which was kind of mixed. But yeah, I mean, it's just always been the dream. It's always been the dream. So it's nice to finally find to find filmmakers that that have that same dream, you know.
Eric Samuels 2 on Instagram wants to know, and so do I, what was your favorite scene to shoot?
Um, let's see. Honestly, one of my favorite scenes to shoot was the courtroom scene.
Why
You
is
know,
that?
I loved it because we basically we went in that section of the film. We're quite long lens and observational from far away, and there's a playfulness with the camera, and we basically just shot it. That was a lot of improvisation too. And when you have an ensemble cast and everyone's improvising, there's like a couple different ways to do it, right? There's hose it down with like multiple cameras, or we just had one camera, like what we did. We pretty much had one camera the entire film. I think there was one scene where we had an extra camera, and there's only one shot that's used from that extra camera in the movie. But so I really liked shooting that because it was purely in instinctual. You know, I'm shooting like 8 people in a room, or however many people are in our 6, 7 people plus all the extras and the judge and everybody. And we just shot it a couple times this way and a couple times this way. And I got to just play with the camera. And if I wanted to pan over for a comedic beat and then pan back, I did it. If I wanted to zoom in and follow something, like when he's getting dragged out and I just pan down to his hand, you know, like all of that stuff was just like we found it in the moment on the fly. And we just shot it like mainly two different angles. That's it. And just I'd focus on this person, then I'd focus on this person, then I'd kind of just do one where I just kind of played, and I got to be really playful with the camera work, and that's something that I really enjoy doing, and it's something that I hope is a signature of my work, is like sort of a playfulness with the camera.
Yep. Well, I
Um,
think you're achieving it. And just from this conversation and our previous conversation, I mean, you just love to have some freedom to just do what you want. You want the scenes to feel organic. You want to be able to do, it's not even like do what I want to do. It's like, I want to go where the action is pulling me.
well,
And I think that's why it
yeah.
feels so alive.
Yeah. And it's always like a thing we talk about. It's like, oh, let's, you know, I'd love to just get a take for me. Let me just play. Let me just try something. And oftentimes directors will let me do that. And like Trey, he likes when I do that because I find something funny. I try to be fun. I like that I like the cinematography to have a sense of humor, and this film is very funny. And Sean and I have some similar senses of humor, and we'll just try something and find something, and just it just makes it better. I think there's something with comedy that it just makes something more relatable and more human. So
It breaks any tension in such a great way. It's awesome. So there's a couple questions here that we only have a few minutes left, but I want to make sure we
I'll
address
try to be
them.
quick.
That's okay. Let's see. Oh, this is interesting. Shybot Myart. I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but either way, Drew, at what moment did you realize in your career that you were on your way? That's interesting. I think.
Oh,
Is there a feeling along your career where you were like, all right, I'm actually going to be a cinematographer? Like this is working out.
no, it's absolutely true, because it takes a lot of guts and a lot of gall to just call yourself a cinematographer, right? I mean, there's always someone older, more experienced, better than you. So at what point are you just like, I'm a cinematographer? I feel like a lot of assistants and gaffers, they also want to be cinematographers, and it takes a lot of guts to make that move. I didn't do that. I started just shooting. I was just an arrogant asshole, just right out of college. I was like, I'm just going to shoot. I'm a DP. So it took a lot of guts to do that, because honestly, I got a lot of shit from a lot of people, and I worked a lot on a lot of like non-union, super indie stuff. And it was Krisha, I think. After Krisha's success, it won South by Southwest. It shot for $30,000.
Mm,
I literally slept on
amazing.
the floor in the same room that Krisha was like, ostracized to, in the house. If anyone's familiar with that film, me and the sound guy were literally sleeping on the floor next to each other, and one of the producers on the couch. It's like that was like true indie filmmaking, and that film won South by Southwest, the Grand Jury Prize, and then it went to Cannes, and then it won the Cassavetes Award at the Indie Spirits. So after all that, and then I got an agent, all like boom. So like that was the moment, I think, where I was like, okay, this is a benchmark. And then I've hit other benchmarks along the way that I've sort of created for myself. And one of them being shooting a film on 35. This was a benchmark. Winning the Palme d'Or. Like these have all been things I've wanted to do. Granted, it happened quite early with Krisha, and it's happened quite early with the Palme d'Or. I don't know what I'm going to do now. Now we got to win an Oscar. Um,
Yes.
but like
Do you
so
feel the
yeah, like
pressure? Do you,
I think you have to have benchmarks in your career and goals to hit. And it's also on the opposite. It's hard when you're not hitting those the way you want. I think you just kind of have to stay with it, because you never know when you're just going to meet the right director and the right project, and all the ingredients will line up. You just got to keep trying.
last thing I want to talk about is this helicopter shot in Anora.
Yeah.
Because any sensible person, and I'm sure your producers were probably like, why don't you just do this with a drone?
No,
Why did you have to do it?
I even said that, which I'm like, why was I being such a wimp about it?
Tell
That's
us about this
Sean.
shot and
Sean was
how it
entire.
ended up. This feels like a benchmark moment.
It was Sean. 100% Sean was like being so stubborn about it, because we were like, okay, but also if we did it on a drone, there was no one that could fly a 35 drone in New York, so we would have had to do it digitally. And Sean was like, I don't want a digital shot in this movie. It just, at this point, it's just, this is a film. This is all film. We're not copping out. We're not doing any of the driving stuff digitally. We're not doing any of the night stuff digitally. Let's do it full film. So then we're like, okay, we get this helicopter, this wild guy. He's the same guy that did Good Time, all that bird's eye helicopter stuff in Good Time.
Oh,
He's like the punk rock indie helicopter guy in New York. He'll do anything. He's that guy. So we get him. He shows up, and I keep telling him, okay, we're going to be flying. We're going to be shooting with this Lomo anamorphic zoom plus the camera, plus it's like 45 pounds or something. And he's like, okay, we'll use the Tyler mount, blah, blah, blah. AC goes to prep the camp, shows up on the day we're supposed to do it. Of course, the thing he has doesn't work, doesn't fit the camera. So he's like,
unreal.
oh, well, I have my red camera on my nose mount, that's like the super stabilized nose mount that he can do it. And we're just like, no, we're going to do it handheld. So like straight up full zoom in handheld at like what 120, and then we started zooming out, and once we hit like 40 mils the camera starts going back and going up, and it is pure chaos. Also, I was not operating it. We were relaying this. Our producer Alex Coco was in the helicopter with a walkie with our operator, who was also the AC, because we just set the focus at like 40 feet or whatever and shot in an 11. So he's basically zooming, holding this beast of a camera, and we're screaming at each other. Like they're outside the window. We could see them. It's windy. The actors are out on the balcony. You can't hear anything. And it was pure chaos. And then we were going to do 2 versions of the scene. So we didn't know, like, we honestly, by the end of it, we rolled a mag. He literally had to reload a mag with the door open, wind, chaos up there in the helicopter. The mag could have just rolled out into the ocean right there. So all of that, and then he loads another mag. We get a couple more takes, and then air traffic control calls us and is like, hey, you guys have to leave the area. You're too close to the airport. You need to vacate the area now. So we're like, okay, I guess that's it. Everybody was very depressed. Sean was pissed. We didn't think we had the shot, basically, because it was just, we could barely see the monitor. It was shaky as hell. Which we were okay with, some shake, But then we got the dailies the next day or 2 days later or whatever. We found one take that was like perhaps usable. And then we sent it to our colorist, Arnold at Photochem. And we had him stabilize it in DaVinci. And we're like, all right, this is going to work. Like, he stabilized it enough where it still felt handheld, but like, and then he colored it and made it look nice. And we're like, okay, I think we actually have it. And to me, that's like the ultimate 70s moment. Like I was saying earlier, like we wanted to use the tools of the 70s and have that sort of like, let's just do it how they would have done it in the 70s kind of aesthetic. And that is the ultimate version of that, where we're literally like Dirty Harry style, just hanging out of a helicopter handheld. And I'm glad you noticed that, because some people don't really pick up on that moment. Because what I was saying about the film, like kind of almost feeling invisible, right? Like that feels kind of just like, oh, it's just like the happy ending moment, right? You don't really realize.
I think like a producer a lot of the time. So whenever I see stuff, I'm like, oh yeah, man, that must have been expensive. Wow, that would have been a huge pain in the ass. Those are the types of things that I notice when I'm watching movies.
It was all those things. And then just the chaos and uncertainty of not knowing if we had it was just like, whew. But it worked out. And it was just like the film gods shining on us, and the happy accidents, that you get when you shoot film. And it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool.
Well, Drew, we love having you here on Go Creative Show, and clearly the audience does too. We've got so many questions. We couldn't get to all of them, but for those of you that asked your questions, thank you, thank you, thank you. I think they were great contributions to the show. Of course, the film is called Anora, so check it out if you haven't already. And even if you have, check it out again, because there's so much to dive into with this film, as well as Drew's entire career. So Drew, thank you so much for being on Go Creative Show.
Thank you so much, Ben. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.